Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There has been a lot that has happened over the last 48 hours throughout the globe, and we have a lot to cover, but of course what we're doing this is for a good purpose, and we're covering the news to bring awareness about different very horrific situations ongoing throughout the world, and to hopefully spur some people to help the individuals that we are talking about that are directly affected by these situations. Now, of course, if you check the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links. All those organizations have gone through a vetting process with us to the very best of our ability, and 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, with 30% or less going to things such as salaries and administration's costs. Now, I do have an announcement, though, and I did put this on our website before the stream, which is one of the reasons why this took so long to actually get up and running tonight. We had the news done, but there were some things I wanted to do as well, and I'd also like to, vocally do this announcement as well. And so, right off of our website, we here at the new news have continued to work very incredibly hard to ensure the donation links provided are safe and secure. However, after recent information has started to come to light regarding at least one of the organizations we have been supporting, our links are being reviewed. As part of the re-review process, we removed at least 2 donation links from our list, and these are Ripley's Heroes. Ripley's Heroes was an organization founded has been supporting Ukrainian troops on the front line, and mostly gained their platform through former Lieutenant Colonel Ripley Rawlings of the United States Marine Corps and former Staff Sergeant James Vasquez of the U.S. Army. However, despite being a prominent speaker at the U.S. Helsinki Commission in 2022, and also despite being active since April 2022, Ripley's Heroes has yet to receive its any independent reviews of their financial records, nor have they received the 501c3 tax designation for a nonprofit in the United States. Furthermore, there have been allegations of possible charity fraud and misinformation on the part of Mr. Vasquez, having moved us to take this action. The other one that we ended up removing from our lists, and you'll see that they are missing tonight, is the Harry Gregg fundraiser. Harry Gregg reached out to ourselves as well as other communities in which we have connections to seeking assistance. All communities collectively did go through and vet him, including known members of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the Foreign Legion. The fundraiser was to raise money to replace a damaged medical evacuation vehicle. However, at this point, no donation links provided to work anymore, and there has not been any communication in regards to the fundraiser in the last several months. We will be removing this and have removed it due to a lack of activity and abundance of caution as we continue to improve upon our processes here. The time between becoming aware of the allegations, specifically against Ripley's Heroes, and those concerns, until the removal of the links after a preliminary re-review was roughly 1.5 hours. We continue to remain dedicated in our work and supporting people throughout the world through bringing awareness and offering effective ways to safely donate. We continue to strive in improving our vetting processes for sources and donation links to proactively minimize misinformation, charity fraud, and safety and security concerning our community. Likewise, we are very happy with our reactive measures and the ability to immediately and publicly address these concerns and the decisions of our staff team. In the meantime, we will do our best to provide safe and secure platforms to donate through our vetting processes. It must be understood that there is no process that is 100% effective, though. As such, we have always encouraged, and we will continue to encourage, the practicing of internet safety and security, and that you do your research on these organizations you wish to donate to in the future on your own as well. Please be sure to check out the Federal Bureau of Investigation's charity fraud link, both on our website in both this announcement and on our donation links page, as well as a very publicly posted on our Discord as well. And I do appreciate everyone's understanding. And I'm sorry for reading that word for word, but that's probably the best way I could word it, is when I was sitting here and thinking about writing it. So I'm sorry if it sounds a little scripted. I'm not meaning it to. But in all seriousness, James Vasquez, we have been following him since really the beginning of the war, since he first went over, and he was actually a source for us for a little bit. And keep in mind, this isn't perfect. We're a very small organization. We're still working through a lot of the things. We don't have the resources a lot of much larger news agencies are going to have. And so it can be very difficult for someone like us to get good sources and good information in the same way. So we are going to be removing James Vasquez, who has actually deleted their Twitter account completely at this point, from our sources lists for both news and information. And we have already removed both of those links, and there possibly will be more in the future depending on how re-review processes go. Him being a source and the validity of the information at the time is one of the reasons why we went ahead with the Ripley's Heroes. But obviously that has been very retracted. So I apologize for the lack of understanding there, or lack of being able to go through and do what we're supposed to do and what we say that we're doing. But the end of the day, once again, nothing is perfect, and I'd rather address these things very publicly, like I did at 10:30 Eastern time this morning, when I first announced that immediately upon finding out and reviewing it, and continue to publicly announce these things, because it's only good. These processes are only good if we also maintain ourselves as being accountable. So I appreciate everyone for your understanding, and apparently very much a support. A lot of people saying that it was a very good move for us to do. So I appreciate the support, and I appreciate everyone with your understanding on this. So I appreciate it, and moving forward, we will hopefully continue to improve upon that, especially as we grow and as we've become. I don't know if you've noticed, if anyone checks out the website. So another big change that has happened around here is in the process and wanting to ensure that we become an actual organization, as I have kind of envisioned, and as we've kind of envisioned. The new news is now registered as a LLC, or a limited liability company. That's something I went through and legally got us registered as a limited liability company, with the hopes in the future of being able to change our tax designation to a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the future, which will require incorporation, a board of directors, and many, many other things that we've been slowly working towards. But in order to maintain this as like a legal entity and make sure that this is, able to be something, a much bigger project going forward, I want to go ahead and reserve those. So even though we're an LLC, we're not taking any kind of monetary gain, which will be really fun to explain to the IRS later. But that's another reason why I also looked back and started going through all of our financial records and releasing them, going through any of the payments and everything that we have done here as the new news, or as the personnel of it, and whether those were donations or whether that is expenses or whatever. But so far, absolutely no money gained from this. It will continue to stay that way, and I have every intention of getting it to a large, to becoming a legitimate 501c3. So if you've noticed that and have been wondering why we went that route, that is why. And if you haven't noticed, well, we are now a legal entity as an organization. So it is now more or less legally official. We are the new news, and we are TNN. So everything has been registered. And with that, I appreciate your guys' kind of wait through this a little bit longer intro. If you have any questions regarding that, or in fact, more importantly, the news and what's happening, you can actually jump in here, as I've already been reading here in the live chat tonight. I'm always happy to chat with everyone throughout the duration of the stream and answer any questions you might have. If you are new here and you have a question, to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as an O-352 anti-tank missileman with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. And I actually did 2 deployments in the Middle East. My first deployment was between October of 2017 through March of 2018, where I deployed into Iraq, or I deployed into Syria and Kuwait. I spent about 4.5 months in the country of Syria, about a month and a half in the country of Kuwait during my time, mostly in transit. And then I went back to the United States. I ran an armory for about 2 years for my company, and then I went back to the Middle East, where I spent most of my time in Kuwait as the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company. Then I went to the Baghdad Embassy Complex as one of the 100 Marines that responded there on New Year's of 2020. From there, I oversaw all anti-armor operations over Baghdad Embassy complex before returning down and actually going to Saudi Arabia down to the Red Sea to train Saudi Marines preparing to go to Yemen. So I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machiner, a fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, as well as a CLS certified as Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training on top of what most Marines are going to receive. And I do have actual real-world experience providing triage and treatment to casualties, mostly during my time there in Syria. I also, of course, was a small unit leader, so I have a lot of I do have training in small unit leadership tactics. But outside of that, I'm a logistics coordinator for a motor transportation company, so I also know quite a bit about logistics and the complications that come with it. That's what I do in the civilian side now, and also what I did while running an armory was a lot of logistical work. And I also have interest in history, human geography. I even have college courses that I have taken in human geography and history, specifically U.S. history. So, but I'm not an expert in any of those by any means. I will try to do my best to answer these questions, and even if I am an expert in these, I always please do your own research, just like you should be doing your own research on charity organizations. The information that you're receiving at any news organization should be scrutinized, and so please go through and do your own research on any of these topics if you have an interest in them. We do provide our maps on our website for every single stream we do, including this one. You can go and check them out, and you can even follow along with this one if you would like. Some of the time, if we find associated articles with the works, we will also put them in there from other news organizations, as well as if there are any official publications or what have you. So please go and check those out. 18 plus links will also be on there, but will not be on the stream. And with that, please feel free to go through and ask questions. And we will now be jumping immediately into the news after a rather lengthy announcement section. And I do apologize. We jump down here and into the news for the night, starting off, of course, in Kyiv, where we get a child casualty update. This is coming from the 21st and 22nd. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 464 Ukrainian children have died, 936 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. Moreover, 389 Ukrainian children were reported missing, and 16,226 were deported. At the same time, 10,597 Ukrainian children were found, and 308 returned home. And that's coming from the press service of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as the Prosecutor General's office. And to further that, quotes, Ukraine returned another 15 Ukrainian children with their mothers and legal representatives illegally deported by Russian forces. That's coming from Dmitry Lubinets, the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, which is the Ukrainian Parliament. What are you doing? I'm sorry, I apologize. My co-host, aka my lovely cat Inky, is apparently going insane in the background. Come here. What are you doing? What are you doing? Please, come here. Oh, is the other one? My other co-host is apparently attacking. So if you see me throw something at my cats, that would be why. So I apologize. Now, getting into a little bit more pretty brutal news, unfortunately. Quote, on the night of March 22nd, Russia launched a massive attack on Ukraine with 21 Shahed 136 drones. Ukrainian air defense forces shot down 16 enemy drones. That's coming from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In Kyiv, at least 3 people have thus far been killed, with another 7 injured after drones impacted into apartment complexes around the city. The rescue work is still reportedly underway. According to sources that we have and connections that we have there on the ground in that neighborhood specifically, which I did not realize we had. They're through one of our researchers who has personal connections in Ukraine. They said that the impacts were every 15 minutes. They were about 15 minutes apart. There were several of them, which we can also see here. This is coming from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He said over 20 Iranian murderous drones plus missiles, numerous shelling occasions, and that and that's just in one last night of Russian terror against Ukraine. Every time someone tries to hear the word peace in Moscow, another order is given for such criminalized strikes. He says if Ukraine's forces on land, in the sky, and sea really brings peace closer, full compliance with the sanctions regimen against Russia really restores the force of the UN Charter. Global unity can restore global stability. Hearing from Aminta Zepper, first deputy minister of the Foreign Affairs for Ukraine, releasing these photos of the strikes there on the northern part of Kyiv. See, most of these just apartment complexes. This immediate aftermath last night coming from the Ministry of Defense. Back and Alive, one of the organizations we've also vetted in the description, also known as Come Back Alive. They've been operating since 2014 inside of Ukraine. And they also are reporting a lot of this stuff too.
Хлопці, добрий день, ви тут навчались?
Ні, було.
Прошу?
Не було.
А що ви тут робите?
Допомагав.
Розбирати завали?
So unfortunately, once again, 3 people so far reported to have been killed and additional 7 injured on the strikes over last night. Which brings us over here and into the Donbass, which is where the vast majority of the war is taking place right now. This is where the most kinetic activity is happening on the front lines, where the most fluid situations are ongoing. And coming from around Kramatorsk, the de facto head of the Ukrainian government in the Donetsk region, we see the latest daily Donetsk update. This is coming from Pavel Kolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He reports this every single morning at 8 a.m. local time, and he says, quote, on March 21st, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 4 killed and 5 injured. We can see this. This is the latest report. This graphic comes out both in Ukrainian and in English every single morning, and this is where we are getting that quote. And as of 8 a.m. local time this morning, 2 people were killed and 1 injured in Chiasiv Yar, 1 dead and 1 injured in Krasnohorivka, 1 killed in Bakhmut, 1 injured in Stepove, and 1 injured in Koshtenivka. So far, since February the 24th of 2022, 1,424 Ukrainian civilians have been killed, with an additional 3,249 having been injured. Now, this does not include areas under occupation, including, of course, the city of Donetsk itself, the city of Volnovakha, as well as the city of Mariupol, where, tens of thousands of people have been killed just in Mariupol alone. Speaking of Koshtenivka, President Zelensky did make a visit near the front lines around Bakhmut, just 15 miles, in fact, in the city of Koshtenivka itself. There, he was able to meet with troops and provide awards.
Маю честь сьогодні бути тут, на сході нашої держави, на Донбасі. І маю честь нагородити кращих з наших героїв, подякувати вам, потиснути руку, подякувати за те, що захищаєте державу, суверенітет, схід України. Дякую.
And so, as you can see, he's presenting awards to troops that have been fighting in and around the Bakhmut area. It's pretty amazing. Something we really don't see a lot of too. If you're checking like the background of these pictures, you're seeing here that you normally don't. These are BRDM2s. which are very light reconnaissance vehicles that we really don't see heavily used. But it's also interesting to see what his security detail's wearing too. If you're, once again, one of those individuals that likes to watch the background. He also made a surprise stop at a gas station. So he just went to this gas station. Just this is over by Kashtanivka. Of course, this country is still running. I mean, even though it's completely at war, things are still the war is obviously still ongoing. He just decided, yeah, I'm just gonna stop into a gas station. I'm thirsty. Hang out, get coffee. Give a good photo op. I mean, that is what this guy's, used to doing. I mean, he's been very well known of going to the front lines, and he's been doing that since he came into office. And he also ended up visiting a military hospital in Kramatorsk.
Дякую за службу. Служу народу України. Служити, будь ласка. Дякую за службу. Служу народу України. Бажаю здоров'я.
Здоров'я.
Як ви? Лікуємося? Нормально. Як умови? А лікарі? Лікарі краще за умови. Це найголовніше. Ну, більш-менш?
Так, більш-менш.
Живі? На?
Так, осколок.
А як ви себе почуваєте? Дякую за службу.
Служу українському народу.
Дуже дякую.
Служу українському народу.
Дякую за службу.
So obviously going there, passing out awards. Something I will also want to note here. Keep an eye on this guy's patch. So we'll be getting a little bit more into this later. But this guy is more than likely had been wounded during the Battle of Bakhmut and is now receiving medical treatment in Kramatorsk. It's probably where a lot of these casualties are. But he is a member that is the patch of the 80th Air Assault Brigade, which, if you may not have noticed or been keeping track, something I'm kind of interested in right now is kind of starting to track and have been kind of trying to track some of the units that are operating in certain areas and kind of figuring out who is where and what are they doing. Because it's just a little bit difficult to track with OPSEC, but it also gives us a better complete picture of the battle space. The 80th Air Assault Brigade was actually fighting in Mykolaiv towards the beginning of the war. They're garrisoned out of Lviv. And then they're reportedly part of the counteroffensive in the Kherson Oblast. That major counteroffensive that finally ended up closing it off and liberating Kherson itself. The 80th Air Assault Brigade then in February rotated to Bakhmut, which is going to be very interesting. But we'll get to a little bit later in the news. Once we get to the international news, that's going to be popping back up again. So it's very interesting to try and track. Something else it's another one I've been trying to track, and it's been difficult, is the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. Are you using a map and grease pencil for tracking? No. Though I actually have a system, and I showed it here before. Actually, I might bring it up here. So I actually have something for this. Give me technical documents. Where is it at? This right here. if it'll load. I apologize for like this detour. My brain likes to connect things at like weird levels. Okay, cool. I don't thank you. And so I like to, but what this is it actually, you can put in like units and stuff. It uses NATO, and you can change like the name of it, what it is, you know, the time and everything. They can make it friendly, hostile, exercise, unknown, fake, you know. So I can say like this is the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. And then I can apply it. And it will tell me, now this is the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, and I can know that they are, because right now we know that the 93rd Mechanized Brigade are actually in Bakhmut. Actually, some of the units inside the city of Bakhmut. And I can do this for all sorts of things. We'll do friend. And that's kind of what I want to start doing, because it's actually NATO symbols, and I can show like defensive lines and stuff. This is something that, this is one of those things that as we, because this channel is something, it's a project, so we can change and adjust it, you know, the time scales like we already have been. This is actually something that I have wanted to implement more into the streams, but it takes a significant amount of time to do that. And we, as this, and I can't have interactive points and stuff like I normally can with how we do the streams now using Google My Maps. So this is something I would like to put into here. Haven't quite figured out how yet. And so if I was to start doing something like this and to have these references, I would have to have like the whole week of time to do this instead of the way we have it set up now, which would really cut the amount of content down for you guys, and it would be a week's worth of news to cover in a single night, and I just don't think that is at this point, I don't think that's a good idea, but that's kind of what I want to do. I think it'd be a kind of a better thing, a better illustration of who's where, but once again, it'd be a little bit difficult, but we'll get to it later. We'll get to the 80th Mechanized later. I apologize for that tangent. Coming in and into Bakhmut itself, heavy fighting does continue around the city, and very little information is coming out currently. Very little information about the situation in the city is available. The situation on the ground right now is best described as tense, as brutal fighting continues in the streets and surrounding fields, and is killing dozens of people daily. Coming from AFP News, there's some very intense shelling that they picked up.
Це вже виходи градів.
And they keep replaying this one part. You can see as that rocket comes in and just slams into that building. So pretty intense. And we continue to see pretty heavy fighting.
Вы на какой причине пасете?
На оту,
На вот эту или на вот так?
которая вот так.
Плюс, отлично, мы сейчас будем сюда. Мы знаем, кто здесь есть. Говорят, что типа союзники, ну, блядь.
Да здесь я не знаю, по-моему, нет никого.
Вот он. Слышите? Заходим, мы, блядь, штурмуем. Все, пацаны, вы здесь, вы там. Отлично.
Ну там, в крайнем подъезде, там есть люди.
Наши?
Ну 24-й.
Точно есть.
Ну не наши, ну наши. Короче,
Ну,
союзники.
наши союзники. В крайнем подъезде, получается, да?
А, все, ты. Нам туда.
Нет, нам
Не,
сюда.
нам крайне.
Нам сейчас сначала...
Да, последняя собака, нам только будет.
Сначала мы заходим в пятину. Вы слышали? Сначала. Заходим.
Представь, все так. Туда по на стенку.
So they're just sitting there and they're talking about, you know, what they're getting ready to go and do. And we can see here just kind of the destruction around the city. The city is pretty much totaled at this point. We can chalk this up to one of the most heavily shelled cities, I think, of the war, which is pretty crazy to think about when you've already seen, you know, Mariupol and you've seen Marinka. Marinka, I don't think anything's better. I don't think you can get any, I say better, any worse than Marinka. Marinka's literally pounded into dust. It's literally pounded into dust. It doesn't exist. It's horrific to think about what has happened to Marinka. Ukrainian Ministry of Defense saying Bakhmut holds.
Фортеця Бахмут стоїть і буде стояти. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Always uplifted. International Committee of the Red Cross actually bringing in supplies here into Bakhmut itself. And this is one of the last roads going into the city of Bakhmut. They said it's under pretty much constant shelling, but that it is passable despite the destruction. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the situation isn't always the greatest. So, still, once again, very intense situation. Very intense situation. And due to operational security and the fluidness of the situation on the ground, there's just not enough information coming out to make any kind of decisive, to give any kind of decisive, clear understanding of the battle space itself outside of very broad terms. Outside of, it's very brutal, it's up close, it's personal, horrific amounts of shelling, very tense situation, very difficult situation, but tactically and strategically for the Ukrainian forces. There just really isn't a whole lot else you can add to it to give it a more definitive level of understanding. It has to be very broad, just because we can't tell. That not enough information is very forthcoming or revealing. We come on down here to Avdiivka, where at least one person is dead and two are injured in shellings across the city. Once again, they ended up striking private houses and residential areas, including apartment complexes. It is with very tragic news, unfortunately, though, that we report that Kane Te Tai, a citizen of New Zealand who famously rescued his mate from his captivity, did end up passing away while defending Ukraine. Kane has been part of the Foreign Legion for a little over a year. And so we end that on the notes of eternal glory to our heroes. Being reported by the Euromaidan Press. There's been a little bit of movement towards Melitopol, reportedly by Ukrainian forces. They have apparently advanced today and captured the northern section in the settlement of Novodanilivka and the southeast of Orikhiv. The town has been in the gray zone between Russian and Ukrainian lines in the region over the last few months. Russian Telegram channels have been reporting that Ukrainian activity near the town since the 17th, repelling multiple attacks. We can see some drone footage here. Big story of the night, however, comes out of the city of Zaporizhzhia, where yet another Russian missile has struck an apartment complex in Zaporizhzhia, collapsing a large section of the structure. And while current casualty reports are varying, it is an estimated one person has been killed, with an additional 25 injured, including 2 children. The rescue operation, however, is still underway. Going from Come Back Alive once again. This is the footage of the moment of the missile strike. There's been a lot of questions about what type of missile it is. I do not know enough about being able to identify missiles midair to be able to tell you. This, from what I have read, this looks more like an S-300 or a Smerch rocket than it does a Caliber or a Iskander-M ballistic missile. So we'll take it at that, but I can't definitively say what struck it. You see here, missile comes in and immediately levels a whole section of building. That is a residential apartment complex being struck in midday. Once again, from Come Back Alive, posted this picture of the damage. Olena Zelenska, First Lady of Ukraine, in the face of the Russian Federation missiles that target Ukrainian residential buildings and gloating over dead and wounded civilians. Unbreakable Zaporizhzhia is under a horrific enemy attack today. The whole country feels its pain. Our thoughts and prayers with the victims and their families. From President Zelensky himself, who once again posted the video of the initial strike. So Zaporizhzhia right now, residential areas where ordinary people and children live are being fired at. This must not become, quote, just another day, end quote, in Ukraine or anywhere else in the world. The world needs greater unity and determination to defeat Russian terror faster and protect lives. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine I released several different photos of this during the attack there on Zaporizhzhia. Anton Jeroshenko released several different photos and videos as well. He did manage to rescue at least 2 dogs from the rubble. And with that, we move on. We come over here into the Mykolaiv Oblast, where we have some downed drones. Quote, on March 20th, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down 2 enemy drones, Supercam S-350, in the Mykolaiv region. And that, end quote. And that's coming from Vitaly Kim, the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration. Our final point tonight inside the country of Ukraine comes from Sevastopol, where a naval base there in Sevastopol was attacked, reportedly by Ukrainian drones overnight. Little information has come out about the effects of the attack. However, there is a lot of footage to determine that it did, in fact, happen. So you can see, obviously, some fire coming in. Small arms fire, it would appear. Some more information coming from these videos. If anyone wonders why I hate fireworks these days, that would be it. And so with that final point, we wrap up the night inside of Ukraine. But that's not all to deal with Ukraine and the war. There's plenty of others. Argent Sink says, hello, Paul. Or hi, Paul. Hello, hello, hello. Always welcome to see you here. With that, we move into the international news. We actually jump over here to Russia for a very interesting point. And a point that I have been waiting for months. Months, I tell you. Months. I called it. I didn't even think that they had enough to do this. So I titled this, well, that's not good. That's because it's not good. Not for the Russians, anyway. Russian trains reportedly headed to the front line once again give us an indication as just to how Russia's war effort is going. Report simplified, not good. Videos coming out today showed Russian T-55 and T-54 tanks reportedly headed to fight in Ukraine. These are the very first tanks designed under the post-war T-series. So the T-10 is technically the first Cold War tank of the Soviets, but it was actually being developed during World War II. In fact, technically the T-54 was being developed during World War II with the first prototype being provided in 1945. But the T-10 was known as the IS-7 and the IS-8 models. The T-55, to give you an idea, get a little bit of history about Russian tanks here. So you had at the beginning of the war, you had the BT tank series and you had the KV tank series, KV-1 being probably the most notable at the opening part of the war. The BT tank being fast tanks, it's literally what they stand for in Russian. And then the KV series being heavy tanks, based off of the doctrines of the time. You had heavy, medium, and light tanks instead of the main battle tank design, which is what we see come around, after World War II. The BT series tanks these end up developing the changes that they make to them and the modifications and the improvements that they make are ultimately what influences and ends up becoming the T-34, and then later the upgunned variant T-34-85. Very important tanks, very, very important tanks. Those also end up becoming certain tank series later. BT tanks, also known as the Christie tank, is actually designed by an American race car designer that was sold as tractor bases to the USSR. But aside from that little history tidbit, the BT, so you have the BT series becomes the T-34. The T-34 and the T-34-85 receive additional armor upgrades in certain variants, and because they have now this kind of medium/light tank that they're producing in incredible numbers, they want to have a heavy tank that can go ahead and engage other things. And so you end up reaching the T-44, which is the upgun, it's the improved variant of the T-34. It has heavier thick armor, maintains most of that. T-44 and the IS-1, or what stands for Joseph Stalin, because the entire tank series is named after him. The IS series is considered the heavy tanks of the Soviets during World War II. You have the IS-1 and the IS-2, which actually do see combat during the war. And then the IS-3, which is developed late in the war, but doesn't actually sees any combat. The T-10, the immediate predecessor, is actually redesignated after the death of Stalin, which is the IS-7. It was the IS-7 and IS-8, depending on the variant model. That starts the T-10 series, which starts in 1953 in production. Immediately afterward, in 1954, the T-54 comes along. And that is immediately followed by the T-55, which is actually just an upgrade of the tank. It's not a brand new tank at all, which is kind of interesting when you see how the Russians actually designate their stuff. So we'll take a look here. We'll take a look at this video, and I'll go back through it here, kind of show you the differences.
Да. Так как-то. Это вот вторая вереница. Сейчас еще одна такая же была полоса.
Okay, so an easy way to identify a T-54-55 from any other Russian tank is this right here. This is one of the easiest things to use to identify. I've talked about how you can identify Russian tanks by their road wheels. The T-55 is much more straightforward than most other tanks. And that's because if you look, they have 5 main road wheels, okay, besides the drive sprocket and the support sprocket in the back. And these 5 main road wheels, there's 4 of them clumped together in a big space between one and then the one in the front. Another big indicator that it is a T-55, T-54-55, specifically the T-55, is this thing in the front. Tanks these days, if you look at them, well, I'm actually going to pull up a photo of a T-90 here to show you. We'll do, actually, T-72. T-72 is probably the most common tank in the world. Not the heaviest produced tank, but the most common tank. Yeah, can I get just like a plain photo of a T-72, please? Just like a very bare bones basic T-72. Por favor. I hate the fact that my computer defaults to Bing. Close enough. All right. Take a look here. If you see this, this is a T-72 main battle tank. It's very easy to identify. Small snorkeling gear really on the side of the turret. And it has this V-shaped mudguard in the front. And it also has the exhaust system coming out of the side there. Very, very distinct tank. Very noticeable tank. But this right here, you can see this round thing that's in the center of the barrel. You'll see these on NATO and Western tanks too. The difference is Eastern main battle tank designs, they are usually center or forward of center of the middle line of the barrel. So imagine this barrel and then put a line down the middle of it. Theirs is either going to be in the middle or forward of the middle of that barrel. And theirs is concentric, meaning it's perfectly around. It's perfectly evenly circular around the entirety of the tank, or around the entirety of the barrel. This is called a bore evacuator, and what it does is it removes excess gases that are built up inside of the gun after it's fired, and that prevents catastrophic malfunctions of the weapon system. The T-55 bore evacuators were brand new, and so the difference between the T-54 and T-55, the biggest difference is actually the fact that the T-55 is going to have one, and they slapped it on the tip. Literally, they put it right on the end of the barrel because this was not originally designed because bore evacuators weren't a thing when it was designed and when it was put into production. This is an after production modification to the T-54, and that is the only major difference between the two tanks. And that's one of the reasons you can identify a T-54 like this one versus a T-55, which is this one, is the bore evacuator on the tip of the barrel. A very distinct tank. It has a very horizontal flat mudguard on the front. All of these are bare bone tanks. This is a time before explosive reactive armor and non-explosive reactive armor. This is a time when it was steel on steel tank engagements, cold, rolled, homogeneous, molded steel. They also have these handguards that are on the side. You'll see those in T-62s and stuff as well. But if you look here, this is actually a counterweight on the end. This is a T-54. You can see there's no real difference except the T-55 has the bore evacuator. There's some towards the end where she actually kind of pans up and you're not having to like break your neck looking at them. There we go. T-55, bore evacuator. T-54 has no bore evacuator in the end of it. What this actually is a counterweight. Russians really don't use muzzle brakes. They use counterweights, and the point of a counterweight is a heavy weight on the tip of the barrel, and this keeps it, when it fires, it's going to go up. It's going to it's going to recoil like any other firearm is going to go up. And the point of that is it actually minimizes how much it actually increases in elevation, so that way it's faster for the crew to get back on target. As pointed out by Book and 40, these are 4-man crews. There's no ammo stored in the turret. Not true. There is ready ammunition stored in the turret of a T-54 and T-55, but their main storage is not actually. It's not, and they don't have an autoloader. It's a strong man with an arm, just like NATO tanks now. These also, unlike many other Russian tanks, these only have a 100mm main gun, and while their effective range is still 4 kilometers or 4,000 meters, their 100mm main gun means that against heavier armored targets, such as another main battle tank, the muzzle velocity of that round is going to, that muzzle velocity of that tank's main gun is going to be weaker at much further ranges. NATO tanks, like what the Ukrainians are getting ready to get, the Abrams, the Challenger, they dwarf these tanks in size. I mean, absolutely dwarf these things in size. If you've seen the pictures of, I think I can find it, Challenger 2 T-55 images. Give me the image. Please stop being dumb, Google. There it is. That's it. This should tell you that is a T-55 versus the Challenger 2. This is in Iraq. Yeah, I mean, dwarfs these tanks, which is part of their design. I mean, they're purposely meant to dwarf these tanks. These tanks are meant to be incredibly smaller than their counterparts. The idea was that these things would be smaller, so they'd be harder targets to hit for Western main rounds, or main battle tanks. A lot of people are asking some technical questions here. Well, let's see if I can answer any of these technical questions with the very, very ever important Book of Knowledge. The Book of Knowledge, for those that don't know, I maintain all of the manuals and stuff I actually got a hold of when I was in the Marine Corps. Some of them I can't share because they're for official use only. And so I don't. They're not, so I don't share that stuff. But for stuff that's declassified, for stuff that's open source information, I will. And one of those happens to be the revised 2014 Anti-Tank Missileman Student Handout, which is not classified. And it has a lot of armor identification. So it's a really easy reference for me to pull out because it's accurate information. It's from the Marine Corps for training anti-tank missilemen. And I can pull a lot of very interesting things out of it, including information about the T-55, which is basically used by every third world nation you can think of. The Challenger 2 looks like it can roll over the T-55. The Challenger 2 probably could roll over a T-55. It's possible. Just get up the berm a little bit, you could probably do it. I'm not kidding. Unsupported suspension, glacier sharp wedge shape, but not with a notch, horizontal munch guard, It's homogeneous, cold rolled steel. It's also supported in the upper rear of the vehicle. Yep. Whistle turret. Direct fire maximum range 4,000 meter. Bore evacuator at the end of the main gun. Yep, I don't necessarily see anything telling me about the size of the armor. Now, something that identifies a tank as a tank, and this is actually earlier on, for those that are wanting to know, the definition of a tank, of what is a tank, is, quote, a heavily armored vehicle up to the equivalent of 1,000 millimeters of armor, mounting a large caliber cannon of 90 millimeters or above, and a large, fully enclosed, heavily armored turret. It must have tracks. It is excellent cross-country mobility, armor protection, and firepower, and the capability of producing a shocked effect on the threat. A tank is an offensive weapon designed for fire and maneuver and assault through an objective. Remember, all tanks are armored vehicles, but not all armored vehicles are tanks. Whereas you're talking about APCs and stuff, they only have between 12 and 25 millimeters of armor, with infantry fighting vehicles having 25 to 50 millimeters of armor. So not very heavy, not very heavily armored at all. So people were asking, will, like API, rounds punch through this? No. API will not punch through it. API 50 cal BMG. If you look on it might be a little difficult for you to see, but if you look where those red folders are up there, those are my promotion warrants. I got 3 rounds linked of API there, and those will not punch through. Maybe, but very highly unlikely, depending on where you hit it. You could possibly do some damage with slap T, and I mean some damage as in you might get a mobility kill with some slap T, and that's about it. Slap T stands for Sable Light Armor Penetrator. It's basically a I don't think it's titanium. I think it might be a tungsten, but it's a 7.62 round shoved in a 50 cal round. It's a 7.62 bullet inside of a 7.62 or inside of a 50 cal round, but it's super hardened metal. It's insane. But it's meant for armor penetration. Those are better for armored vehicles though. Uranium rounds, depleted uranium rounds, which the United Kingdom says that they will be giving Ukraine for their tanks, will 100% punch through these things. In fact, depleted uranium will essentially punch through any tank like it's butter. Does not really matter what tank it is, it will punch through it. Most heat rounds, modern heat rounds, and AFSDS slap rounds, Sable Light Armor Penetrators, are going to punch through these tanks as well. These tanks are the old way of designing tanks. These are steel tanks. Meaning these aren't like the Abrams. These aren't like the T-90s. These aren't like these are not like the Challenger or the Leopard, even the old Leopard 1s. These tanks are built in the same fashion you would build a tank in World War II. It is just steel. It is cold, rolled, homogeneous steel. This is an outdated design of making tanks. They are much easier to kill with any type of weapon system. These are the pinnacle of the next thing Russia has to pull from its stockpile will be World War II. That is what is left. Because these tanks were designed in 1945. That's it. The Russians only have, if these things are going to Ukraine, the Russians only have World War II era tanks left in stockpile. That's it. They do not have the tank production at their tank factories to replace their losses. They're getting continually older. I said it when we saw the T-62s. I said it when we saw the T-72s, the bare metal T-72s with no ERA on them. I said they're going to be pulling from older and older stockpiles, and the Russians are the hoarders of military equipment. Looking forward, he says Gilligan's Island hadn't even aired yet. Gilligan's Island wasn't even probably like a thought. Okay? Most people still used radios when this tank debuted. Think about that. In fact, when this, if not mistaken, when the first prototype of this tank came out, Hitler was still alive. It may not see combat until it gets into the Cold War. That is how old this tank is. It is the old way of doing things. It's not, once again, it's not mixed armor. It is deplorable. This has been like my focus of a talking point today since seeing this, because I couldn't believe it. Because I have talked about this happening, this moment of they're going to pull out T-54s and T-55s, and I know the war is over. Because if you are pulling out T-54s and T-55s, you don't have anything left. You've gone through the T-72s and the T-80s and the T-90s and the T-70 and all of the variants thereof. What you have left is T-34s and IS-2s and IS-3s and maybe a PT-76 lying around somewhere, which would be better than World War II, but not by much. Because it's supposedly an amphibious tank. And we know how amphibious tanks look. The Bradley's supposedly amphibious, and I'd love to see that thing try and swim in water. But I digress, and I move on from that point as we move into Germany. Because in Germany... Sorry, I want to take off my beanie. Because in Germany, remember I told you about the patch. The 80th Mechanized Brigade, and that's because after battlefield successes in Mykolaiv and Kherson Oblast last year, as well as a rotation of Bakhmut in February, there are elements of the Ukrainian 80th Assault Brigade, or Air Assault Brigade, which appear to be conducting training on the Striker, which is being donated by the United States. And so we can see they're rolling around. Of course, the Humvees. Gotta love the Humvees. The Humvee. The original AM General. And we can see they're rolling around there. Coming in here on the Strikers. Rolling the patches. So this is in Germany. Where they're learning how to operate these vehicles. Operate them in an actual... manner, doing actual training with them on different weapons platforms that they have. And this is how we can identify that it is the 80th. As we get closer here, if you take a look, you can see that is the air assaults. So that is the air assault, the Ukrainian air assault insignia with the paratrooper and the wings and all of that, very similar to the VDV's insignias, because they keep in mind the Ukrainian military is originally based, quickly moving away from, but originally based on the same Soviet design. But you can see there in the center that is the exact same pattern. That is Air Assault Brigade, 80th Air Assault Brigade. So command, subunit. Patch. So that is their insignia. It's the same insignia we were seeing earlier. That is the 80th Air Assault Brigade, which is operating there. Which is the same individual, the same unit of the individual that we actually just saw in the hospital there in Kramatorsk. Once again, getting back to I'm very interested in tracking these guys. This guy's rocking and rolling on a 50 cal here. They're shooting it right off the top of the Striker. case you're wondering why there's this funny thing on the front of this 50 cal, this is a blank firing adapter, or a BFA for a 50 cal. They're weird. They also suck to put on. Going down here and into Geneva, Yemen's conflict parties have reached a deal to release 887 detainees. The parties to the conflict in Yemen conclude a 10-day meeting in Switzerland today and finalize the implementation plan for the release of 887 conflict-related detainees from all sides. The parties have also agreed to convene in May to discuss more releases and committed to undertake joint visits to each other's detention facilities to enable access to all detainees during the visits. And if you would like some more information, you can go check out the International Committee of the Red Cross. Book of 40 asks, what is the barrel configuration? He's asking about the 50 cal. So the BFA, no, I'm sorry. The BFA just slides on. So the blank firing adapter just slides onto the barrel itself. It's got 3 prongs here, makes it identifiable, but it also helps keep the gases. It keeps just enough of the gas inside of the system to actually to properly recoil the weapon system and all of that fun stuff, because they're firing blank rounds. They're not actual live ammunition. It's just blank rounds that they're shooting out of this thing. Barrel configuration. This one is looking like it is. If you're going to see them on a vehicle like this, this other video might be better to see what they have mounted, because I can tell what type of 50 cal it is by sight. Oh, come on. Are you gonna have a better? No, you're not any better. How about you? Are you any better? Not really. I think I want to say that these guys are rocking these systems specifically are the M2HBs, which makes sense. They could be the M2A1s, but I don't think so. I think these are original M2HBs. So for those that don't know what I'm talking about, so the Army and Marine Corps are converting their 50 cals, or they were converting their 50 cals. I hope it has stopped by now. The Army put in a requisition. They found that operating a 50 cal could be quite difficult for most of their machine gunners, and of course wanting to cut down just how much work their guys had to do, because they can't seem to trust their guys to do their own job, or train them enough to know how to do their own job. The Army decided they wanted to come up with a new 50 cal that was easier to handle for troops in the field. The idea they came up with was the M2A1. The M2A1 means that you can put the barrel in. This is partially going into how machine guns work, but you basically slide the barrel in and twist it, and it's set headspace and timing on the weapon system, which allows it to operate and cycle properly, field rounds into the chamber, recoil, all of that fun stuff. It all goes into that, how fast and how slow the gun is shooting, the machine gun is firing. All it goes into the headspace and timing. However, they're fixed headspace and timing, which means they're not as interchangeable as original 50 cals are. And so they also means that they have a higher, much higher failure rate, which is something the Army failed to disclose to the Marine Corps prior to after the Marine Corps conducting several investigations including while I was there, about 50 cows blowing up in the field. The M2 HB stands for M2 heavy barrel. The M2 was originally designed and fielded during World War II. That had undergone some upgrades, of course, but the M2 design basically has not majorly changed in its operation. And I actually had, they're retrofitted, don't get me wrong, they have been retrofitted and gone through refab many times, but based off of the serial numbers of 50 cows I had in my armory, even the ones converted to M2A150 cows, I had some that had served at least as far back as Vietnam, if not Korea. So, pretty extensive use. The 50 cows are, basically the way it works is you screw into the back of you actually take the barrel and you actually screw it in. There's actually a screw on the end of it. You can screw it into the gun and then you back it off X amount of clicks. You'll actually hear it click, and that sets the headspace. And then you can set the timing. There's a timing nut in the back. It's right underneath the sight. It adjusts, some intricate, some integral parts of the weapon system. And you can adjust it in, it's very tiny, but you'll hear the clicks. And there's something called a headspace and timing gauge, which is what I have in my hand right now. This is a headspace gauge. It is measured down to the, to whatever ridiculous measurement you can get with a micrometer. And it tells me exactly the headspace and timing of no and no-go on this thing. You literally put it in and try and shoot it. Same thing, these are timing gauges. This makes sure that, once again, I have a fire or no fire gauge. This will fit into the slot. So this is my go gauge. This will fit into the slot on the 50 cal if my timing is correctly. If my headspace is correct, my no-go gauge will not. My weapon system will fire if it is timed correct, or if the timing is correct. My weapon system will not fire if my timing is not correct. And you actually go through and you test these things on the gun before you actually put it into action. That was a little too complicated for the Army, so they tried to change it, and they screwed it all up in the process, and I will never forgive them for destroying such a fabulous weapon system that has served for over 100, or has served and been around for over 100 years now. Is the M1919, by the way, is the original 50 cal design. Can you imagine dragging around water-cooled 50 cal? It was just the 30 cal that was water-cooled. But still very heavy. Ask Johnny B, aka John Basselin. Coming out of Paris, violent pension reform clashes do continue. And protests have become more widespread. President Macron has refused to back down from reform to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. It would appear that, strangely, a lot of this stuff has been deleted. This is a Macron effigy there in nice France. Usually not a good sign. This is go to Noble, France. And the Saint Nazaire Bridge along his bridge in France is blocked since 6 a.m. this morning, and the gantry is broken.
Bientôt à terre, deuxième pile est en feu. Et là pour moi, l'électricité. Les lumières sont encore allumées dessus, un truc de fou.
So a rather unstable political situation developing there in Paris. Coming from Edinburgh, Scotland, more than 30 have been injured after a ship is partially capsized. 33 people have been injured after a 76-meter, 250-foot ship tipped over in strong winds at dry dock in Leith, Edinburgh. The Scottish Ambulance Service said 21 people have been taken to the hospital after the incident on Wednesday morning, while a further 12 have been treated and discharged at the scene. And now that we've wrapped up Europe, we now jump down here and into the Middle East, where we have several situations coming on out here in Aleppo, in Syria. Six Kurds were killed by unknown assailants. In northern Aleppo, 6 local Kurds were killed and several more were injured when they gathered to celebrate the beginning of Nowruz holiday, a traditional holiday which celebrates the Persian New Year and the coming of spring. According to some reports, the shooting began after a verbal skirmish about the impermissibility of the celebration of Nowruz. Initially, protest groups were suspected of the incident, but they denied the involvement of their militants in what happened as a call for finding and punishing the killers. At Aleppo International Airport, Israel has launched a missile attack on Syria's Aleppo airport. The Israeli air attack has hit Syria's Aleppo airport, causing some material damage in the second strike on the facility this month. Syrian state news agency SANA, quoting an unnamed military official, did not mention if the strike caused any deaths or injuries. The report said the Israeli warplanes fired the missiles towards Aleppo, Syria's largest city and once its commercial center, while flying over the Mediterranean. Usually, unless there's an ammunition cook-off, you're not quite going to see flashes like that. At least in my experience. Going over here in Tajikistan, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake ended up hitting Tajikistan. The shaken near Kujand, Naya, Bobajan, Gafurov, Violati, Sugd, by an earthquake of a magnitude 5.9. The quake hit at a very shallow depth of 5.6 kilometers or 3.7 miles beneath the epicenter of Kajund. in Tajikistan. Early morning on Thursday, March 23rd, or 4 p.m. Eastern Time here on the 22nd. There have been no reports of casualties thus far. But just across the border in Afghanistan and Pakistan, at least another earthquake did also strike. At least 13 people were killed and dozens others injured after a strong earthquake shook Afghanistan and Pakistan. At least 9 people were killed and 44 injured in northwestern Pakistan, and hospitals in northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province were put into a state of emergency overnight. At least 4 people were killed and 50 injured in Afghanistan. Houses and buildings in both countries were also damaged, authorities said. Pakistan's meteorological office said the quake was a magnitude 7.7, but Pakistan Meteorological Department revised it down to a 6.8. U.S. Geological Survey says the quake was a magnitude 6.5. With the quake epicenter was 40 kilometers or 25 miles the southeast of the Afghan town of Zurm, near the borders of Pakistan and Tajikistan. It struck at a depth of more than 185 miles. Once again, we're seeing collapse of buildings here. Unknown militants did end up killing 8 people during an attack by militants in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The incident occurred near the city of Abbottabad. The criminals shot the victim's car with a grenade launcher. Among the dead was the original head of the party of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. No one has yet taken responsibility for the attack. It is 18 plus footage there. Jumping down here and into Somalia, at least 30 al-Shabaab militants have been killed during a counterterrorism organization. During the counterterrorism organization, the province of Middle Shabelle, the military personnel of the country's armed forces liquidated 30 militants of the al-Shabaab group. At the scene of the clash, security forces discovered the weapons of jihadists. During the exchange of fire, several soldiers were also injured. So we are continuing to see fighting there against al-Shabaab inside of Somalia. Crossing the Atlantic, we land over here in Pasadena, Texas, a suburb of Houston, where a chemical plant has exploded in Pasadena. The explosion and fire erupted Wednesday at a chemical plant in a suburban Houston, injuring 1 person. Officials are still investigating what the cause of the blast was at 12:11 p.m. local time at the plant of the city of Pasadena. Preliminary information shows that the fire occurred as liquefied natural gas is being transferred from a tanker truck to a storage tank. The county sheriff, Ed Gonzalez, said the injured person was taken to the hospital and was listed in stable condition. The man possibly suffered from burns, but his injuries do not appear to be life-threatening. The facility is owned by NUS Phenol and produces cumene, an organic compound used to make a variety of things, including herbicides and pesticides, cleaning products, and auto parts. And so that is the explosion there at the chemical plant. known quite a few people that have worked in those chemical plants, and they say it's an incredibly dangerous place, and people do get killed there, unfortunately, quite frequently, just because the work is immensely dangerous. Coming out of Atlanta at the CDC, or Center for Disease Control here in the United States at their headquarters, potential deadly fungus is spreading quickly throughout the United States. The fungus Candida auris, which causes a highly infectious and potentially deadly infection, is spreading faster in the United States healthcare facilities and is likely becoming more resistant to treatments, a new study has begun to show. C. auris is a fungal species of yeast that can infect humans and spread in the blood to major organs. The infection occurs most often in healthcare settings and long-term care facilities and is rare in healthy individuals. But for people who are immune compromised or receive regular invasive treatments for other illnesses, it can often be fatal. Since C. auris is mainly transmitted in hospitals and other healthcare settings, researchers suspect that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic may have played a role in the fungus's spread. And this is coming from the U.S. Center for Disease Control. They're saying it is drug resistant. And so that is all the hard-hitting news. But we have a couple of small, I say small, but we have a couple of, nice, interesting topics to end the night on as we try and find a little bit something more uplifting, not as hard-hitting, but something a little bit more uplifting, a lighter note to end the night on. And then we actually jump back here over to Geneva, where you go back to CERN, to the Large Hadron Collider, where neutrinos were spotted inside the world's largest particle accelerator for the very first time. For the very first time, physicists have created and detected high-energy ghost particles inside the world's largest atom smasher. The findings could help unlock the secrets of how stars go supernova. Tiny particles, known as neutrinos, are spotted in the Phaser Neutrino Detector at the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, the world's largest particle accelerator located in the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN, in Geneva, Switzerland. Neutrinos earn their spectacle nickname because their non-existent electrical charge and almost zero mass means they barely interact with other types of matter. These very high-energy neutrinos in the LHC are important for understanding really exciting observations in particle astrophysics, according to Jamie Boyd of CERN particle physicist and Phaser spokesperson, said in a statement. The new detections could help explain how stars burn and explode and how highly energetic neutrino interactions spark the production of other particles in space. If you'd like some more on that, Life Science has probably a much better explanation than I could ever provide. And we jump down here, and in just off the coast of Dubai here, and in this tiny settlement on the coast, where you can see that there is a 6th century monastery. An ancient pearl town has been discovered in the UAE. Archaeologists say they found the oldest pearling town in the United Arab Emirates. It was built at the end of the 6th century AD. Among the preserved artifacts, the researchers found a scattering of pearls and equipment in which the stones were mined from the seabed. Although only small fragments of a few dwellings have survived to this day, there is reason to believe that there was a large city of hundreds of houses made on a coastal stone and lime mortar. Its total area was about 12 hectares, and scientists believe that the settlement was not seasonal but permanent. People were there throughout the year, and the city was inhabited by several thousand people. Pretty wild. This area has the whole region of the Middle East has just an insane amount of history we just never get to explore because of the unstable factors there. This is just fascinating history. absolutely fascinating history. Well, with that, that's everything in the news that we have for you today, at least from our sources. And so I hope that you guys have found this knowledgeable, if not enjoyed it. And I do hope that you guys will be back to join us once again on Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central for another 48 hours of news and review. And in the meantime, I hope that you guys will check out the video description below, or our website, or even our Discord to go and check out those wonderful organizations. 70% or more of their donations do go to helping people, and 30% or less to things like salaries and administration's costs. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Go ahead and help us try and grow our impact and grow this channel, because the more people that come here and watch the news, the more people that will be here to donate, and of course the more people that participate, the larger this project will get, to where we can become a viable 501c3 nonprofit organization in and of ourselves, and also be able to raise a lot of awareness and a lot of money for people in need. In the meantime, I hope that you guys will stay safe, that you, your family, and your friends will remain safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волноваги, чутно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волноваги, чутно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волноваги, чутно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.